it healthy for someone to play tackle football when they're 8 to 15 years old? And I would argue no, because the brain's in formation. If 50% of the mothers in this country understand the connection between playing a collision sport and brain health, and tell their teenage boys, you can play any sport but not tackle football. It won't immediately kill football, but it will gradually change the socioeconomics of it so it becomes a gladiator sport.
Leigh Steinberg is a legendary sports agent
who's represented over 300 professional athletes across football, baseball, and beyond.
For 5 decades, he's been shaping the business of sports
and redefining what it means to lead from behind the scenes.
Every time an offensive lineman hits a defensive lineman at the inception of a football play, it produces a low-level little bit of brain change. So you could have an offensive lineman who played in high school, college, and pros who had 10,000 subconcussive events, none of which have been diagnosed, none of which he's aware of because he just feels stunned after every play.
Every day you are making your brain better, or you are making it worse. Stay with us to learn how you can change your brain for the better every day. This podcast is brought to you by the Change Your Brain Foundation, dedicated to ending the concept of mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health. Go to changeyourbrain.org to learn how you can support our mission. Tana and I are so excited for this podcast. Our friend Leigh Steinberg is with us, who is a legendary sports agent, entrepreneur, and chairman of Steinberg Sports and Entertainment, widely known as the real inspiration for Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. He has represented over 300 professional athletes, including 64 NFL first-round draft picks, 8 number 1 overall selections, and 12 Hall of Famers, and has negotiated contracts exceeding $4 billion while directing over $1.2 billion to charitable causes. A UC Berkeley graduate, Leigh is also a philanthropist, media personality, and author. He recently established the Leigh Steinberg Foundation for Concussion, Traumatic Brain Injury, and Brain Health to continue champion brain health and making a lasting difference in athletes' lives. Plus, we met when we were doing our big NFL study and found that it's not just athletes that have problems with their brain. Sometimes it's people who care for the athletes. So I'm just so honored. Tana and I are so honored that you're with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with both of you.
So let's start with how we met. Do you remember what was going on then?
I remember that you had a client, Charlie White, I think it was, and we ended up on the same radio broadcast.
Yeah, I think with Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I saw Charlie White, Anthony Davis, USC running back.
Yeah.
USC running back. And then I think I told you about our work, and then you told me about your work. When did you first get concerned about traumatic brain injury in football?
So I had a crisis of conscience back in the 1980s because I was representing half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. They kept getting hit in the head, and we would go to doctors, prominent neurologists, and ask, how many are too many? When should we contemplate retirement? And they had no answers. So we held the first Concussion Brain Health Summit in Newport Beach in 1994.
Really?
And we had Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Warren Moon, Drew Bledsoe, a whole series of players listening to the state of the art and what we knew, with a number of prominent neurologists, Bob Cantu and Julian Bales and Jim Kelly. By 2006, we held another big conference, and we had Bennett Omalu, who was the subject of the concussion movie. And he came and said he thought that 3 or more was a trigger for exponentially higher rates of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, premature senility, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and depression. And so I called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. So we've been holding brain health summits every year. Last year in New Orleans, we held 2 hours of one with a number of neurologists. And along the way, so we kept doing it, and recently set up a charitable foundation to try to raise money for research and to try and raise awareness, but also to do what you do, which is to help untreated and affected subgroups. So firefighters who fought the fires in Los Angeles, or the homeless, or inner city kids, or the military. And so I continued to campaign on this. One of the things I learned is in football, and as you rightly point out, it is not just a football issue. It's a hockey issue. It's young women who head the ball in soccer, but it's people who fall off horses and trip and all sorts of things. So it's a societal problem. And so I've found a couple treatments that start to neurofeedback, RTMS. It seemed to move the core, but I learned through you about the concept of a brain a brain scan. And I've been fighting the good fight ever since.
I love that. But you knew about this in 1994. You started talking about this, and it took a long time before.
Well, actually, the NFL
listened.
formed its concussion committee in 1994,
But
it never sponsored a brain imaging study on players. Instead, they studied rats. They put little tiny helmets on rats, put them in dryers, threw them down laundry chutes, sacrificed them.
David Hobbs at UCLA was called the rat doctor.
And in front of Congress in 2009, Roger Goodell said they didn't know if playing football caused long-term brain damage. They were studying the issue. And then Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from Los Angeles, whacks him and says, "Commissioner, having you act like you're studying traumatic brain injury in football is a conflict of interest." It's sort of like the tobacco companies studying lung cancer. Do you remember that?
Yes. Well, it's worse than that, Dan, because what happened is they had a head of their brain committee named Elliot Pellman. Now, his background was he was a rheumatologist. Now, you're the doctor, not me, but I don't think rheumatology has anything to do with the brain. And he had gone to med school at the University of Guadalajara. So the NFL can pick any expert in neurology from all across the country, and that's who they protect. And so when I started pushing this, he went into Sports Illustrated and other publications and said I was a fearmonger. The truth is the NFL had the studies and knew that one in close temporal proximity to another had an exponential effect, that multiple concussions would cause long-term thing, and they just lied to the players.
Oof.
So our first NFL player was Brent Boyd, who played for UCLA, and then he was an offensive linebacker for Minnesota. We saw him in 1999. And his brain clearly, because on SPEC, you can clearly see traumatic brain injury, right? You can't see CTE because that's an autopsy diagnosis, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But you can absolutely see this is a head trauma pattern. And so I said, "Do you have a workers' comp claim?" He applied to the NFL. They laughed at him, called me a charlatan. And then 2007, Anthony Davis came to see us. And again, it was clearly traumatic brain injury. But he got so much better that he wrote to the commissioner, who never wrote us back. But because of Anthony, we partnered with the Los Angeles chapter of the NFL Players Association. And now we've scanned 400 players, high levels of damage, right? It's like, stop lying about it. But the one thing they don't know is you can make these brains better. If you scan them and then put them on a rehabilitation program, the earlier you start, the better, right? Shouldn't we be scanning players when they start and then periodically to just know where they are?
So think about this. Every time an offensive lineman hits a defensive lineman at the inception of a football play, it produces a low-level little bit of brain change, right? So you could have an offensive lineman who played in high school, college, and pros who had 10,000 subconcussive events, none of which have been diagnosed, none of which he's aware of because he just feels stunned after every play. You asked how I got started on this. So it's the early 90s. Troy Aikman has just led the Dallas Cowboys to victory over the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, I represented both quarterbacks, so it was speaking of conflict. But what happened was he had a concussion. So I went to visit him at Baylor Hospital. Now, Dallas is awash in celebration. Horns are honking. They've got big skylights going because they're going to the Super Bowl. Troy's in a darkened hospital room, and I walked in to visit him. He's all alone. And he said, "Where am I?" And then he asked, "Did I play today?" Ooh. And then he asked, "Did we win? And what's that mean?" So I gave him the answers, and his face brightened, and he was all excited. 10 minutes passed. And he looked at me and said, "Where am I? Why am I here? Did we play today? Did we win today?" Now, at first, I thought he was just teasing me, but he wasn't. And 10 minutes passed, and he asked me the same questions again. I finally took a piece of paper and wrote down the answers to the most commonly asked concussion night questions by Troy. But it terrified me how close the deadline was between sentient consciousness and dementia.
Wow.
And I thought, crazy. I have to do something here. My responsibility to athletes has to be more than simply stacking dollar after dollar in their bank book. It's got to be concern and care for their long-term health.
I love that.
Do you have any stories of your athletes that because of your work with concussion has really been transformational for them?
Part of the problem, Daniel, is that athletes have been acculturated from Little League and Pop Warner to accept norms about long-term health that are different than ours. If we would say on a value system, the most important thing is long-term health. The next level down is the ability to have a pro career. Below that, the ability to play in a given season. Below that, the ability to play in a given game. And the least important thing is this play. The athlete turns it on their head, and it becomes this play. You don't understand. Just like the military, they're in a state of denial about their health. And if you have young people's denial and you have athlete denial, then you have like denial cubed. And so it's been a rough road to try to get athletes to deal with this. But I'm starting to have a little bit of success with veterans.
Well, and aren't they afraid to say anything, even if they feel something? Like they don't want to be diagnosed with a concussion.
They don't want to be scrutinized. So
Right.
You have an ex-athlete who's on the air, for example, and he doesn't want people micro-analyzing every statement, looking for the symptoms of brain damage.
Right. And even while they're playing, I mean, even in younger high school and college, it's like they don't want to say that they've been hurt. They don't want to.
To your point, Tana, Peyton Manning took the
impact test.
The impact test and faked his answers.
So he scored purposefully poorer. So if he had a concussion,
interesting.
Right.
he'd still be able to play.
So they game the system, and so
a Hall of Fame quarterback is doing that. Imagine
this is going to be a cultural issue.
Yes. And my best allies have been the wives or the mothers. And so when I meet with an athlete for the first time, I say, look, here are the facts about the connection between pro football and brain damage. So we have to pledge today that you'll work with me to make sure your son has an awareness and is charting the number of concussions, and we're monitoring this together so that we surround him with people that are concerned about brain health.
You know, there's another way to tackle this. We just had Julius Randle on our podcast because I've been working with the NBA superstar for the last year or so. And I just talked to him a little while ago. He's doing so well because he loves and cares for his brain. We have to get NFL players to go, oh, it's my brain that makes the decisions that help me be successful or not. And if my brain's not right, I'm not right. And if I love and care for my brain, but the big misconception among players is CTE is chronic, progressive, and untreatable. And that's a lie. And it comes from neuropathologists who don't actually treat living people. Well, I treat living people, and you can come to me with evidence of CTE, but if you do the right things, your brain can be so much better.
See, and that's where you're a real inspiration to people, and your teachings and your practice are an inspiration, because the commonly belief is that a TBI brain only gets better, worse, not better. And you've just contradicted
and that's a lie.
That. Right. But the point is, we have to spread that message. We have to make sure that in an education sense, we're telling athletes that if they're vigilant and willing to do the work, they can get better.
When we first met, you were struggling with an addiction. And how did that impact your relationship with your family and with your work? Tell us a bit about it.
So I didn't start drinking till I was older. I started out in college. I was one beer Steinberg. So I didn't have this problem for my whole life, but eventually a series of things in my life, the death of my father, 2 kids that were declared legally blind at a young age, breakup of my marriage, all this destabilized me, and I didn't have the right coping skills. So I turned to alcohol. And I didn't understand the power of alcohol. I didn't understand that it would take volitional power away from me. And, it wasn't a matter of self-discipline. I had cravings that were so strong that I would drive my car to my condo, and I'd say, tonight, I'm not going to drink. Tonight's going to be different. And magically, 15 minutes later, I had driven to a liquor store and was sitting with a big bottle of vodka. So the effects of it were that I was mostly a private late-at-night drinker, so it didn't affect my work for a long time. And because I was productive, I was surrounded by people that wanted me to continue being productive. So what happened was that eventually I crashed. And I would sit on my father's bed, and my only sentient thought was where I could find more vodka. And I had an epiphany, and I thought, I was brought up by a father who had 2 core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was make a meaningful impact in the world, heal pain, and help people who can't help themselves. And I'm failing on all these counts. And I had a sense of proportionality. I'm not a starving peasant in Darfur. I'm not with the last name Steinberg in Nazi Germany in the late 30s. I don't have cancer. I don't have heart disease. I have nothing that wasn't self-inflicted. What excuse do I have? And so at that point, I went and followed a 12-step program with a unique fellowship and did all the work. And part of my journey was that I knew intuitively that something might have happened to me physically. So I came and saw Dr. Amen, and we did a brain spec, and it was not a pretty picture.
Can I ask you one question? When you say you crashed, what did crashing look like for you?
Closed my office, stopped practicing.
Oh, wow. Like for real?
Right.
So you got pretty dark.
Pretty dark. And I hit bottom. So in alcoholism or addiction, you have to hit a bottom at some point and realize that your circumstances are so reprehensible, they're so unacceptable that you have to make a change.
Did you know that physical and emotional pain run on the same circuits in the brain, and they fuel each other to keep you in pain? In my new book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Pain, I'll show you how to break free from what I call the doom loop and step into a healing loop that can transform your life. Less pain, more joy. It's absolutely possible. Pre-order my new book now and receive special bonus gifts at changeyourbrainchangeyourpainbook.com.
Do you mind sharing? You said you did a 12-step program with a fellowship.
I got a sponsor. I had a home group. I read the big book. I worked the 12 steps in order. I accepted the fact that I was powerless over alcohol and life had to change. I plugged into a higher power to help me with the situation. And that was, in a couple of weeks, I'll be 15 and a half years continuously sober.
That's amazing.
And
then shortly after that, you also saw us, and we scanned you. How soon? And you were sober when we scanned you?
Yes.
So let's put up the scans. And one of the reasons I want to do...
Okay, if you're at home, don't be scared by what you're about to see.
Well, and they're, I think, 13 years apart because we just rescanned you. The one on the left is your first one. You can see it looks deeply scalloped. All those bumps and ridges it's the brain's dying. And if you look at the top left one, the temporal lobes, those big holes, it's bad. You were in trouble. But I mean, I've seen thousands of drug-affected brains, and I know if you stop and do the right thing, it can be better.
How long had you been sober when you had that scan?
That was 2013, since March of 2010.
Okay.
So if we would have seen March 2010, it would have been way worse still.
Right.
But then this year, and it's very important to understand this, you're also 13 years older. And your brain, like your face, doesn't get better with age, right? It usually gets worse. But your brain this year is remarkably
significantly
better. And it can be better still.
But that looks pretty good.
I'm so excited.
But
this is the concept. You're not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. I can prove it. And not only in NFL players, but in regular people who've maybe not been great to their brains, you can make it better. And you did.
And he's very proactive. You're very proactive now.
First of all, I used your supplements. So I used to call it restless sleep, but it's restful sleep. I use your supplements. I worked with Christian Willmeyer, who was a godsend to me. And then I've explored all sorts of healing modalities. So I do hyperbaric oxygen 3 times a week. I do a process called Nanobi, which you breathe through a cannula, and it helps the brain, and it also helps with protein folding. I've done about 120 RTMS sessions.
RTMS, let's explain that just for people.
Repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Yeah, I call it Woody Woodpecker because
powerful magnets that stimulate brain activity, and it's FDA approved for depression, but it can also be helpful for anxiety. There's some evidence it can help with addiction. And
so you're sort of not kidding. You went after it every way you could think
I went around the world. I went to Medellin, Colombia, and had stem cells. I've actually shot stem cells into each temple and dropped my glasses so I don't have to wear them anymore. They had a magical effect. I've done a number of billions of stem cells.
That's amazing.
So I want to take these modalities into sport so that it's stem cells, hyperbaric, Nanobi, Bimini, red light, and I've done them all, and I continue to do them. So I've looked everywhere for solution, and then if Dr. Amen can just get me to stop drinking Diet Dr. Pepper, and I once brought a Diet Dr. Pepper into his office, and it was like I was bringing poison, and
But you were bringing poison. It's not like you were bringing poison.
So funny.
There's this fascinating
he went like
study.
this.
There's this fascinating new study on aspartame, which is what's in Diet Dr. Pepper. They gave it to mice, and it made the mice very anxious. And then they gave the mice Valium, and Valium calmed down the mice. Why they did that, I'm not quite sure. But what they found was their babies were anxious and their grandbabies were anxious. So is it possible that our mental health epidemic in children is aspartame part of it, and that it's in 5,000 products and started really going through society in the late 70s, early 80s. And now we have this anxiety disaster. I think it's just one thing to look at, but why would you put a poison in your body? So let me tell you a story.
Well, I did the same thing with alcohol.
You did the same thing with alcohol. So we were at a luncheon recently, and we sat next to Lisa Trout. So Lisa and Kenny Trout own racehorses, and they own Justify. So Justify is the most recent Triple Crown winner. And as I was sitting at lunch and Tana's rolling her eyes at me, I'm like, would you ever feed Justify junk food? And she goes, no. And I'm like, well, would you ever get him stoned? And she laughed and she said, no. I said, would you ever get him drunk? And she's like, of course not. Now, she knows my work, so she sort of knows where I'm going. I'm like, why wouldn't you do all of those things for Justify? He would never live up to his potential, is what she said. And I think they sold Justify for like $75 million. But you and all of the players you represent are worth so much more, right? Even people that aren't making these huge contracts, they're worth so much more, but they don't have the mindset of, why would I put this crap in my body? Because it's a love issue, I think, that Lisa and Kenny loved that horse, so that horse would perform. I don't think we love ourselves. enough.
But I think also, Dr. Amen, the whole food pyramid, the concept of nutrition, the things wrong with it. Remember, people felt like they were being virtuous by going to Diet Coke because they weren't doing sugar.
We thought it was free.
Right.
Oh, there's no calories, so it's free. But people who use diet soda have a higher incidence of obesity. They have a higher incidence of diabetes. They have a higher incidence of metabolic syndrome because it's not free.
Well, everything you put in your mouth matters. It matters. So just because it doesn't have calories doesn't mean it doesn't have chemicals. It doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect. So
your understanding of nutrition and the deleterious effect of putting that in your body is not widely known. In other words, most people think that I'm not drinking all that sugar in Coke. So the more you can spread this information on nutrition. I mean, I recently read a book by Noah Duvall Hariri called Sapiens. One of the points he makes is that in the evolution of our species, there was no grain until 5,000 to 6,000 years ago when they cultivated it. So the human body's intolerant of that. There was no refined sugar.
Right.
So the human body's intolerant for that. And what we think of as normal, you've just pointed out, can be destructive.
Well, and even when they first did start cultivating it, it's very different than it is today because we're mass marketing it and putting chemicals in it and preservatives and, we're doing GMOs
Pesticides.
and it's not the same thing. So.
Well, and the goal is for you to love yourself and then just ask this one question. Is what I'm doing now good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with science and love, you just get so much better. And you've been obviously so much better. How do you think you maintain the sobriety today, despite still being in a very high pressure job?
The one great thing about recovery is that once the cravings leave, then in my mind, I'm over here. I'm not over there.
So you've left it behind.
Right. So the point is, I understand I'm supposed to be struggling, but there's no struggle. Once you...
So you don't have cravings at all anymore?
I don't. I haven't had them for 13 years. And so I just stay focused on trying to make a difference in the world. It's not all about you. Right. Can I use athletes to deal with bullying? Can I use athletes to deal with sex trafficking? Can I use athletes to deal with racism? We had Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight champ, do a PSA that said, real men don't hit women. And that could do more to trigger imitative behavior in young rebellious adolescents than 1,000 authority figures or Oscar de la Hoya and Steve Young, Prejudice is Foul Play. And I ask each athlete to go back to their high school, college, and pro and set up programs that enhance the quality of life. So, we have one athlete, Wart Dunn, who just put the 220th single mother and their family in the first home they'll ever own.
Wow.
By making a down payment. So my job at this point in life is to tackle a variety of societal issues and see how we can make it better.
That's amazing.
Have you dealt with many athletes who had substance abuse issues?
It's so much less than it used to be. In other words, I came through a time in football where there was heavy cocaine use, there was heavy steroid.
The San Diego Chargers. A lot of my NFL players, the San Diego Chargers, they told me that the doctors were actually giving them uppers and
right. They were using steroids, and unlike baseball, I was passionate about player stuff and said, let's just ban the stuff. So the economics are so high right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure for them.
Players stay in shape all year round. They don't have to, they never
They
get
got
out.
a lot of motivation.
Yes. And so the incidence of self-destructive behavior is a lot less. Matter of fact, I could show you statistically that the rates of domestic violence and a whole lot of things are lower in professional athletes than in the same age group in their own situation. Each incident is blown up, and so it gives you cumulative effect that it's, gone to the dogs. But those incidents are rare. Now, in basketball, they can smoke marijuana.
Which is so crazy to me. You're paying these
we
athletes
talked
so
about
much
that
money.
with Julius, that they don't test for it.
That's
Right.
mind-blowing.
And players show up high for the game. And some still play at a really high level. But Julius says the difference in him from smoking a lot of pot to deal with his problems to not, but having a mechanism to deal with his problems has freed him immensely. Yeah. Do you think the other sports leagues are going to stop testing for marijuana?
No. I think that it's you would not want to be high on marijuana in a football game. I mean, they may do it in basketball, but I guarantee
it's too brutal.
It's you'd be carried off the field because you'd
I would think their drugs of choice would probably be opposite of that. They probably want to be more high than low.
Yes.
Yeah, if they were going to be anything.
What's your hope going forward? We see in the NFL from 2009 when the commissioner said they didn't know if playing football caused long-term brain damage. I think it was 2011, they put posters in every NFL locker room saying concussions can lead to dementia. So we've seen, and then we've seen them change some of the rules, the kickoff, which the president hates. We've seen them changing, but they're still wicked concussions, right? If we think of the Miami Dolphins quarterback.
Right. So let's start with younger kids. Is it healthy for someone to play tackle football when they're 8 to 15 years old? And I would argue no, because the brain's in formation. And if it takes 3 weeks for an older player to recover from a concussion, it could take forever, and you could alter brain structure. So that's the first thing. Second of all, there now are programs that play football with no hitting in training camp and no hitting during practice. They just model the plays. They're doing that in the Ivy League. So that's a second thing we can do. Here's what I feel if we don't get a grip on the concussion epidemic in contact sports. If 50% of the mothers in this country understand the connection between playing a collision sport and brain health, and tell their teenage boys, you can play any sport, but not tackle football. It won't immediately kill football, but it will gradually change the socioeconomics of it so it becomes a gladiator sport. And the same thing that happened to boxing and mixed martial arts, which is people clearly who have overwhelming economic need. So I think it's the existential threat to the dominance of pro football, which right now is not only the most popular sport by 3-1 in reader surveys. 91 of the top 100 Nielsen-rated shows last year were NFL football. So for the first time in our culture, it's the most popular form of entertainment. It's the highest rated entertainment. So if we can get this right in pro football, it sends a trigger message to every other collision sport. It makes people think about their own brain health. So That's why you have a charitable foundation that tries to bring awareness. That's why I have a charitable foundation, so that we get the facts out.
Yeah. And the brain is actually not finished developing until you're 25. And so
if that's true, and given that that's the fact, why would you have kids play Pop Warner football?
It's crazy. It's amazing to me. And one of our kids is dating someone who played football and was groomed from the time he was very young. Very young. And he's been doing that all the way through college, so you have to wonder, like, how many people are.
And we love him.
He's amazing.
But we have to scan him.
So look, what's important is to not get put into that category of you're just trying to destroy football.
Right.
I believe athletics teaches great values. It teaches abstaining from current gratification for future success, work habits. It's teamwork. It's performance under pressure. It's taking a complex body of information and processing it in real time. These are all skills which are great. We're just trying to make these sports safer.
Right. I would agree with you with that. And that was one thing that this young man was saying, was that he really missed it. He had a really hard time when he left it. And he left because of concussions, and he wanted to have a normal life, and he was starting to get really worried. He got hurt. And he said it was very, very hard, because not only are you getting so much attention for playing football if you do well, but that structure and you have a coach that just, is always guiding you, and your teammates, and there's so much good that comes with it too. It's very hard for them when they have to leave.
Right.
Well, I think most parents will know my opinion is the brain is soft, about the consistency of soft butter. Your skull is really hard and has sharp bony ridges. Letting kids play tackle football puts them and their future, which means it's also putting their marriage and their ability to be good dads at risk. Now, obviously, everybody has a problem, but we should love and protect our brains. And I often say golf is good. Tennis is terrific. We just went through the US Open and it was great fun. Table tennis, obviously, is the world's best sport. I think it's such an important discussion to have. And like you said, the NFL is not going away. And one of my players signed an $80 million contract. So if you're gonna play, you should be rehabilitating your brain all the way through, not just when you retire. And somehow together we have to get the message out. CTE is not necessarily chronic, progressive, and untreatable. It's you need to start putting your brain in a brain healthy environment no matter what. Like firefighters, it's a brain damaging profession.
So if you're going to have Pop Warner football, you ideally have an education component where when they sign up, they would get realistic information about what the danger is. And the point you just made, it's what is your life after collision sport? Okay, you're going to stop playing at some point. Even if you're Tom Brady, it's 45. But the point is, so I work with players in terms of second career planning, everything else. But I'd like to have a packet of Amen nuggets to tell to every potential client. And I do discuss in that first meeting the fact that we have to be conscious of long-term health.
So I rewrote the 12-step program in one of my books, Your Brain is Always Listening. I thought that was written in the 1930s. I'm like, if a neuroscientist wrote it, how would I change it? And I actually took step 1, your life is out of control, and made that step 2. So I think with every player, you start with step 1. And step 1 is, what do you want? right? What do you want in your relationships, your work, your money, your physical, emotional, spiritual health? What do you want? Because clearly, when you decided to stop drinking, your behavior was not getting you what you want. But if you start with, I think, everybody, like all of your clients, that would be a great, it's like, what's the goal?
Let me tell you what we do. When I think the most important skill in life is listening.
Is what?
Listening.
Listening.
If you can draw another person out, cut below the surface responses, and understand their deepest anxieties and fears and their greatest hopes and dreams. I mean, the biggest skill in life, if you can put your head into someone else's head and heart into heart and see the world the way they see it, you can navigate your way through. So what I do at the very beginning is I give an athlete a set of values: short-term economic gain, long-term economic security, family, profile, geographical considerations, spiritual considerations, and then for an athlete being on a winning team, the quality of coaching, the system the team plays, the facilities. And I say, before we get into this experience, I want you to prioritize what actually fulfills you and what you're looking for in life. And let's do a little internal audit of what's most critical to you. So you have a guiding path as we go through this experience. So that's what I do in the first meeting.
Yeah, so it's
you
very
are asking
similar.
them what they want.
Yes.
So our exercise called the one-page miracle. On one piece of paper, write it out. So when Julius and I were going through a hard time in the season, it's like, okay, so does your behavior fit what you want? And I think that was so helpful for so many of my patients.
I asked them to do a spot check at different points of their career. Okay, so you're 21, but now you're 30. Have your values changed? Have your goals changed? And are we on the path to fulfilling you? You know, have we done second career plans? Have we, how's your family life? What are we doing? So I try to be holistic in the way.
I love that you're not just doing contracts for them.
Right. Oh, my goodness.
It's amazing.
Like I said, the role of an agent has to be more than just cramming dollars into a bank book. It has to be truly having a deep understanding of what the value system and of each individual person. You don't represent them generically. You represent that person and who they are without me superimposing my values on them.
So that sounds very different than Jerry Maguire and how Jerry Maguire was portrayed.
Jerry Maguire has to learn. Jerry Maguire has to go through a growth process where he starts to understand what truly is important. And so it's a journey that starts him off with being pretty brutal and ruthless, and has him move in a different direction.
And how accurate was that?
Cameron Crowe followed me around for about 2 years, and he went everywhere I went. He went to the NFL league meetings. He went to the draft. He went to games. He went to a Super Bowl party. He sat in my office for hours, and I told him a lot of stories. So what part of it made it on the screen, is something I'll keep between him and me.
But it's close enough.
Well, this has been so much fun.
So much fun.
We're so grateful to know you and to support your path and helping people who've had traumatic brain injury. Like 3 million people every year have a new concussion.
So one last thing, I have a book coming out, which will, I'm not as prolific as Dr. Amen, who his book written is the size of a large library. Okay, you could read your way through the rest of your life on scintillating tips for better health from Dr. Amen. This one's called The Comeback, and it's stories of resilience. Life will inevitably push you back. You'll have reverses. We all have them. You'll have frustrations. So the question is not whether you may crash. It's how do you come back from that? How do you find the light in all the darkness? How do you...
We should have you back when you...
When's the book coming out?
At the Super Bowl, at my Super Bowl party.
Fun.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
so
you.
The book is The Comeback.
It's
going to come out early February of next year.
So that's my third. I wrote Winning with Integrity, which is a book on the 12 steps of negotiating. And I wrote The Agent, very clever name, right? The Agent, which is an autobiography. And this one will sort of trace stories of people who faced major life setbacks and how they recovered from it and how they rebuilt their life or whether it's marital problems, whether it's financial problems, whether it's addiction.
Can you tell us a story from it?
Well, for example, I tell the story of Coach June Jones, who was a coach at the University of Hawaii. And he falls asleep in his car and hits a concrete stanchion on the freeway, and his aorta is cut, and most people would die. But he lives, and he broke like 24 bones. So how does he come back? I mean, in his case, it was mostly his Christian faith, but the point is, athletes have a remarkable ability to heal. They have bodies that are not like ours. They have faster rehab in them, or they couldn't survive. So it's a story of how he goes from the point of death and comes back and coaches a team. And when he comes back, they're the only undefeated Division I team in college football at the University of Hawaii.
Wow. I love that. Thank you so much. Well, let's stay connected, and we're just so grateful for you.
We can change the world, Dr. Amen.
You
guys are changing the world.
There are days when I need to be at my best, whether it's back-to-back clinic sessions, long writing days, or just keeping up with life. That's when I take Peak Energy from BrainMD. It gives me clean, steady energy without jitters or crashes. And I'm not the only one who loves it. It just won a 2025 Nexty Award, beating over 500 other supplements. If you want real energy that lasts, check it out at brainmd.com and use the code podcast20 for 20% off. You're listening to Change Your Brain, or watching Change Your Brain every day with Leigh Steinberg. He has a new book coming out called The Comeback, February 2026. Leave us a comment, a question, a review, subscribe. We are here for you. Thanks so much for
Thank you so much.
watching and listening.